Hey everybody, real quick, if you need a recap of Yellowjackets Season 2, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you right to it. Now, Season 3 picks up about 1 month after the events of Season 2. Lottie has been put in a mental institution, and they're getting ready for the memorial service for Natalie. Some things have changed, for the better, like Van's around more. As for Taissa, she's become the first state senator to impeach herself before she even took office. Not much has changed with Shauna, and Misty's still Misty. The day of the service, Shauna does go talk to Callie. She tries to, at least, but Callie kind of shuts her down. The relationship's been a little bit contentious after, what happened. Callie, however, goes to school, and Shauna heads off to the memorial service, where it really is just Shauna, Taissa, Van. Jeff shows up, and then a few other people. Natalie's mom makes a very horrible speech, and then afterwards, the girls go out to the bar to toast their fallen friend. At first, it starts out with the fact that Natalie's no longer with them, and then they start talking about what people would say at their funerals. And then finally, they notice, where is Misty? Shauna thinks that it's nothing to worry about, that Misty probably decided to skip the funeral on her own, but then Shauna gets a really weird feeling, like she's being watched in the bar. She brushes it off and then goes back to joking around with her friends. And Misty did, in fact, skip the funeral. For the past month, she'd been beating herself up over taking her friend's life. Obviously, she didn't mean to, but she's been shouldering all of the blame, staying to herself. Walter's been there to support her the entire time, and the day of the funeral, he decides to give her a little pick-me-up by placing a key on the dresser as he leaves, knowing full well that Misty's going to ask, hey, what is that? And Walter goes on to say that he did some digging and he found out that Natalie had a storage unit not too far away, and that's the key. He offers to go clean it out, knowing full well that Misty will say, no, I'll do it, and sure enough, it gets her out of the house. She heads on over to the storage unit, and she doesn't really find anything of value, but the one thing she does find is Natalie's old leather jacket, and she decides to put it on and wear it. Just like her friends, she decides to go grieve at the bar. But unlike her friends, she causes a scene. She gets kicked out of the bar, she's walking home, and that's when Walter pulls up, because Misty forgot her phone at the bar. And while she's yelling at Walter, my friends will come. I don't need you right now. He has to give her a cold dose of reality that her friends were called, and they didn't pick up. The bartender just went down the list until he found Walter, and Walter was the first one to answer. Misty feels incredibly alone at this moment, and she breaks down sobbing in Walter's arms. Taissa and Van also headed out that night after the bar. It took a lot of convincing from Taissa to get Van to go out with her, but she decided to. The relationship with Taissa and her ex hasn't been great, and now she's got this old flame who's back in her life. Even though Van is dying, she wants as much time with her as she can. So they go to a fancy restaurant, but in the middle of the service, they decide, we're just going to dine and dash. And they do that. They're chased by the waiter who wants them to pay up, but, they're too fast. They're soccer players. And they escape. And they start kissing in the alley. They go home, they do the thing, but what they're unaware of is the fact that that waiter ended up having a heart attack. So this little innocent dine and dash skit ended up costing this guy his life. And then finally over with Shauna, after she got home from the bar, she raided Callie's weed stash, and then she got a phone call from Callie's school telling her that Callie had been suspended. Because Callie was near her locker when she overheard some girls talking about her mom and the rest of the Yellowjackets probably eating people in the woods, and she decided, you know what, I'm going to show them a taste of their own medicine. Somehow she was able to order intestines from like a food delivery service, which, by the way, was delivered by Randy, and she walked up to the girls and she dumped all the intestines on them in lunch. When Jeff and Shauna get to talking about it, Shauna doesn't think it's a big deal, but Jeff definitely thinks it's tied in with what happened a month ago at Lottie's commune. Shauna thinks it's really nothing more than just a teenage girl being a teenage girl, but Jeff reminds her, I'm a blackmailer. You're a murderer. A month ago, she watched your friends chase you in the woods trying to kill you, and then she shot somebody. This isn't normal. Once Callie gets home that night and she's doing her homework with Shauna decides to broach the topic a little bit. She's relieved to find out that Callie wasn't acting out. She's not a troubled soul. She was just defending her mom. And Callie even had the video to prove it. And Shauna cracks up watching Callie walk up to these girls and just dump a bunch of guts on them. Later that night, though, while everybody is in bed, Callie's in the kitchen making herself some food. And then she hears the screen door open. and she gets curious. She goes outside, and there's a package delivered to Shauna with the symbol from the woods on the corner. Curiosity gets the best of her. She opens it up, and it's a videotape. Before she can even dive into the videotape, though, Jeff ends up startling her and telling her, hey, just because you're suspended doesn't mean you're on vacation. Get to bed. Now, for the flashback, it's the summertime. The cabin is long gone, but the group has done a really good job of making themselves a community. They've got shelter built up, game is running through the forest, and they're able to hunt and no longer have to resort to eating themselves, which is good. But there is contention brewing, mainly between Shauna and Mari. The girls decide to have a game of capture the flag. The losing group will serve as the servants for the winning group. They're going to have a summer solstice festival, so the stakes are kind of high. But when Mari's group wins, she starts rubbing it in Shauna's face, and Shauna does not take kindly to that. Her entire mood is just bad. So much so that when Natalie asks her, hey, are you going to go to Van's little speech? She worked really hard in it. Shauna says, no, I'm not. And instead, while everybody else is listening to Van tell stories about the Yellowjackets and how they survived and how they were tough and resilient, Shauna's sitting in her makeshift teepee, writing in a journal about how these people are horrible, about how they're glamorizing what actually took place out there. She writes down that the truth is, after what they've done, they can never go home again. After Van's little speech, they do have to get ready for that night's ceremony, which means that Shauna and her losing team are going to have to cook and prepare the dinner, which Shauna's not happy about. She does so with Melissa, another girl that was on her team that doesn't really say much at all, but she does speak up when Mari starts to kind of poke fun at the fact that they get to kick back and chill while Shauna and her group have to prepare dinner. It's the first time that Shauna has actually seen a personality from Melissa. Melissa, though, does one better, coming to Shauna's defense. When Akila comes over with a crown that Lottie had made for Shauna for that night's ceremony, and Shauna brushes aside saying, get off me, Melissa walks over and stomps on it, acting like it was a mistake, but it clearly wasn't. The tension, though, is building. The leadership group, though, which really is Natalie, she's kind of the den mom of everybody, gets together with Jen, Taissa, and Van. They start talking about how hunting's been. But eventually the conversation turns to Coach. Whether or not any of the girls that have been out there have seen any signs of him. And Natalie quickly says, guys, there's no way he survived out there. Stop. Stop looking. He's dead. The group ends their little meeting, but as they're walking out, Taissa grabs Natalie and says, hey, you got to do something about this Mari-Shauna situation. It's boiling up. And Natalie kind of just says, yeah, look, it's going to happen. I mean, we're a bunch of girls. There's going to be infighting and bickering. It's no big deal. But Taissa thinks it is a big deal. Now, while that was going on, you had Lottie and Travis go out in the woods, and Lottie gave Travis some mushrooms, so he was tripping balls. Suddenly, though, his good trip turns to a bad trip. He walks up to a tree, he touches it, and then he starts clutching his ears, saying, you don't hear that? You don't hear that screaming? But Lottie doesn't hear it. To which he turns to her and says, okay, you will. What Travis heard is a distant memory when they get back to camp that night and they go through the Summer Solstice Festival. They all get together at the big table. They're all eating. Half of the group is being served by the losing half. And Shauna, for whatever reason, is paired up to serve Mari. And she decides to spit in her food, which Mari takes big exception to. It starts a physical altercation between the two where they have to be separated. And finally, Natalie sees what Taissa was talking about and says, all right, fine. If you want me to be camp counselor, I will. Both you guys grounded. You're in your teepees for a week. I don't want to see you guys. Mari gets so pissed off at this because she feels like she did nothing wrong that she walks off in the woods. Shauna, however, stays for the final ceremony of that night, which is Lottie telling a prayer for those that have fallen. And mainly 3 people. Javi, Jackie, and Shauna's baby. And when they get to Shauna's baby, that's when Shauna can't take it anymore and she walks off. Suddenly, though, everybody starts hearing screaming coming from the woods. It's loud, it's terrifying. It's unlike anything they've ever heard before. And that's when Lottie turns to Travis and says, is that what you heard? And yeah, that is what he heard. But there's somebody else out in the woods. Even though Natalie said, guys, there's no way Coach survived, he did survive. He's been on his own since he left. But he did get a stroke of luck. As he was walking through the woods, he found a shelter that housed a bunch of survival items. That included a ton of food. So once he cleared it out, he decided to cover it, hoping that maybe he could catch something. But Coach is very much alive. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.